Hello all, here we are again with another MasterGMAT sentence correction question. And in the coming days or weeks, we're certainly going to also present you with other parts of the verbal section or other questions, as well as questions from the quantitative part of the exam. So for now, what you can do if you'd like to try the question is actually pause the recording for however long you need in order to try it yourself, and then unpause it so that we could go through the explanations together. So you may pause the recording now. Okay, good. If you did try the question, I hope it wasn't too hard. It seems easy enough. Now, if you actually saw our first video, you also know that at MasterGMAT we have something called a work order. A work order is basically work priority in order to get to an answer choice efficiently, quickly, more precisely, than would otherwise be the case. Now, the first step in our work order is basically to read the sentence itself and try to see whether we can find a grammatical error. So let's take a look over here. Let's read it. It says, if Texas were a country, it would have had the highest incarceration rate in the world. Now let's look for a grammar error. Now we see from the word if over here that we're dealing with a conditional. Now obviously with conditionals we have to be very, very careful with the structure of the tenses presented to us. So we see that if Texas were a country, now this is in the past. The conditional part of the sentence, the if part, has the past, which means that the second part or the other clause, which is basically the result, should be in the future past, or in other words, it should be simply would plus your past participle. But in this case, we have the future past perfect, which is would plus have plus had, which would indicate a third conditional. Now, don't worry too much about these terms. Just try to remember the structures as much as possible. If we have the condition part in the past, the result part should be simply would plus the third verb form, but over here we have an extra verb which makes it the future past perfect, and we don't want that. It mixes two conditionals together. Therefore, the second step is basically to eliminate all answer choices that have the same error, and we see that the only answer choice that has the exact same error is A. We can obviously eliminate that. We don't even need to reread it. Now the next step in our work order is simply to look at the other answer choices and try to find a grammatical error, one by one. Now we don't want to look for any stylistic issues yet. We want to concentrate on grammatical errors. So let's look at B. B says, if Texas had been a country, it would have the highest incarceration rate in the world. So it would seem that the second part, the result part, would have fixed something. However, let's look at the first part. It says, if Texas had been a country. Now this is the past perfect in the condition part, which means that we're dealing here with the third conditional. And if that's the case, the result part should not be in the future past, but should be in the future past perfect, or past future perfect as some people call it, and should have an extra verb over here. So unfortunately here it's just the future past, and again they're mixing up the third conditional over here with the second conditional over here. We can eliminate that. Not only that, pay attention that when we're dealing with the third conditional, we deal with situations which should have happened but did not. And in this case, it presents Texas as a hypothetical situation, which doesn't make sense. Texas was never a country. A better conditional than the third should be used over here. So we can eliminate B. Let's go to C. C says, if Texas were a country, so if plus the past, it would have, so we have the future past. This actually fits the second conditional profile in terms of structure. We have the past simple in the if part, and we have the future past, or would plus your past participle, in the result part. Everything seems fine over here. Let's go to D. Now D says, had Texas been a country. Now be careful, because when it begins with had, this is just an indication that you have a conditional over here, especially when you have had Texas been. It is a past perfect, and it indicates a third conditional. It's exactly like B. It's exactly like saying if Texas had been a country. It's just another form of the same thing, which means that the result part again should be in the future past perfect, but it's just in the future past. Therefore, they're mixing conditionals again. We can get rid of that. Let's look at E. If Texas was a country, it would have. Now, this seems to fix everything because we have the past over here and we have the future past over here in the result part, which seems to be the same thing as C. However, let's click on this. Now we have our nifty time awareness tool. Let's click on 1:40. Obviously, we took longer than that because we're chatting. Let's click OK. And we see that we're actually wrong. Now, why are we wrong? Take a look at the explanation over here. It says this answer is grammatically incorrect. Was can never be used in conditionals. If and unless can only be followed by were. Now this might seem strange, but it is an exception in the language. When you have a conditional, in the conditional part of the sentence, if it necessitates a past verb, we never ever use was, we use were no matter what the subject is. It could be if I were, if you were, if they were, if he were, it's always were. This is just a little exception rule which you must learn. Pretty easy to remember, and that's why this is wrong. But obviously we get to try again. At MasterGMAT, we don't believe in just spoon-feeding you the answer, but we give you information, we let you try again. We obviously see that E is now blocked out. However, we eliminate everything else, and we know that C was the best answer among the 5. Pretty good. Let's click on that. And indeed, we got that. We get a nice little explanation as to what happened over here with the conditional, and we see that we have the past in the conditional part and the future past in the result part. Everything is great. And that's it. That's how you attack conditionals, and we'll see you next time for another question.